Joining me today is Steve Geller, who's the executive director of SEVCA. So, Steve, Southern Vermont, I think a lot like a lot of New Hampshire, and housing's a core issue.
Yeah.
And when we last talked, you said some people, are paying 50, 60, 70% of their income just to be in the house. And I want to spend a second sort of understanding the dynamics of that and the ramifications and what it is that communities can do, what it is that your agency can do, how we should think about this.
Well, there's a variety of ways that we need to approach that. One is the most fundamental, just let's keep people in their homes so that they don't become homeless, which is obviously the most wrenching thing that can happen to a family.
And I'd imagine that also is correlated with a variety of other negative things.
Oh yeah, sure, mental health issues and other kinds of things that lack of stability, that dislocation then affects their ability to get or keep a job, to be good members of their family, to be parents that are taking care of their kids. It infiltrates every part of their lives. It's such a fundamental understanding and need that people have to have a decent place to go home to live in. So we see that's become more and more one of the key pieces that we see, and the goal is to first and foremost to keep people in their homes. Ultimately, what we need to also strive for as a larger community is to create enough permanent affordable housing so that there are sufficient availability of decent affordable places to live in all of our communities, and it's not concentrated in one or two towns and others you can't live there. People who grow up in a town often find that they no longer can afford to live where their parents are and where they grew up. It's really too bad.
And these issues aren't central to Vermont or New Hampshire.
Not at all.
I've heard stories from California, Washington State, Texas. I mean, it's everywhere.
Everywhere. And the Northeast and New England is one of the most expensive places to live, relatively of any place around the country. So we're not a Boston, for instance, but also in Boston, people earn higher wages. So it sort of evens out a little bit that way.
So in terms of the community involvement and getting a network of affordable housing, how difficult has that been? Do people have a not in my backyard attitude?
Unfortunately, that is often the response that people have. Sometimes with decent intention, they don't want the character of their communities, particularly small rural communities, to change dramatically with large-scale housing developments.
But that makes some sense.
It makes sense.
If everything's on a scale of 2, 3, 4, a scale of 50 seems out of place.
Yes, that's very valid. But there are lots of very well-planned housing alternatives for people that are not concentrated that way, that are smaller scale, that are scattered housing, that still enable people to live in lots of different communities and share in the joys and happiness that come from living in different places.
So there are meaningful, planful solutions to make that.
There are very much. The issue, the not in my backyard is an issue at times, but much more the issue is the lack of resources. The cost of land, the cost of the tax rate, but sometimes there's the zoning regulations that require a minimum lot size for each unit of housing that make it impossible to afford to build affordable housing.
Right. I mean, if it's 2 acres per unit, I mean, to put 3 houses in, you have to have 6 acres.
Right.
I mean, that's not affordable.
That's certainly a factor. But over time, the availability of resources at the federal and state levels have eroded, and so in order to do this, there needs to be a public commitment to have some sort of support from our tax dollars to make this possible, and that's become much more difficult.
Are you seeing it out of Montpelier in Washington at all? Any movement on that?
Well, not in Washington at the moment. That's remained flat and even eroded for decades. In Vermont, there is a very big commitment to affordable housing. They've done a lot of good, but the sheer number of dollars that are needed to meet the need is just not there.
Do you think there's a chance that the needle that we'll see change out of Washington anytime soon?
Well, I'm always optimistic, but the short-term signs are not tremendously hopeful given the stalemate that we have right now in Congress.
You know, and I'm speaking of Washington, we're out of time in this segment, but I want to turn to sort of it's the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty. I know that's something you know a lot about. So when